Hello and welcome to Buy That Guitar, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. I'm your host, Ram Tuli. This podcast is about the joy of guitar. That includes buying guitars, selling guitars, collecting guitars. We're talking vintage guitars, new guitars, used guitars, pre-war, flat tops, electric Spanish arch tops, custom shop guitars, limited edition guitars, basses, amps, effect pedals, lap steels, mandolins, banjo. If it has strings, we're going to talk about it. I've spent most of my life studying the vintage guitar market. It's truly something I love and I'm passionate about. I can talk guitars all day, and I'm going to. I'm with my buddy Howie Statland of Rivington Guitars in New York City. How you doing, Howie?
Great. How are you?
Great. So today, this is the last episode of the season, number 1, and I wanted to do it with you.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I'm honored.
Tell me about Rivington Guitars. This is a very unique. The best little guitar store in New York City is what everybody says.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Rivington Guitars, I started in 1998. It was started not by me, but a guy named Tom Nastasi, who I was renting a rehearsal room from in the 90s. And he started it and had a quick falling out with his business partner. And he was going to close it after it was open. My band was breaking up at the time, and I just needed a job. Tom was a friend of mine. And I said, let me run that guitar store of yours. I'll bet you I can make it work for you. So he hired me, and I worked for him for about 3 years or so. And he just really didn't want to continue. And I took it over in 2004 and took over the business. It was on Rivington Street, which was at the time rough part of New York City. Now it's like the trendiest place in New York City. And it was rough when we opened it up. I got held up at gunpoint one time, and they were running numbers next door. The guys next door got arrested a couple times. It was pretty rough around the edges. But we were selling guitars out of there, and when I took it over, I started really hustling.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working for him, I was really there and more letting guitars come to me. When I took over the business, I started really traveling around the country. I did a lot of traveling with my band over the years, and I'm a musician, and that was like my main until I started dealing guitars professionally. And when I met my wife around 2004 and took over the business around that, really started hustling and driving all over the country. And
now, you were always dealing in vintage guitars or just general?
Yeah, we were always dealing guitars. I was always, like, even before I started working at the store, I was always buying and selling my own gear. The store itself was always just focused on vintage guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal really to find the working musician or the guitar player or the person who does it as a hobby, just the guitar of their dreams. We like to make dreams come true for guitar players.
Mm-hmm. So you moved to 4th Street, right?
Yeah. So in 1998, we opened on Rivington Street. In 2008, we moved to East 4th Street, our current location. And then in 2014, we opened a second location on the same block, which was, we called it Rivington Guitars Unplugged, and it was just acoustic guitars. And then during the pandemic, when we couldn't have any stores open for the period, and nobody knew what was going on, I ended up closing that store. And so everything is back in the one main location there at 73 East 4th Street, right around the corner from CBGB's.
Oh, good. So you basically saw everything. That's the art area, right? That 4th Avenue.
Yeah, it's the East Village. It's the East Village.
So that's the art place. So that's the best place to have the best little guitar store in New York City, isn't it?
It is. Believe it or not, the block that we're on has the most theaters of any block in New York City. So it's
good.
Yeah.
You were in a band, but I didn't know this.
I was in a band called Thin Lizard Dawn in the 90s. We were on RCA, and we toured with Lenny Kravitz and the Verve Pipe when they had a #1 single. And we tried, and then we broke up. We did a lot of touring and recording, and then I went and did a lot of experimental music. I played with I did some stuff with Philip Glass, and I did some more experimental stuff. Then I had another band called New York City Smoke, and then I basically dove headfirst into this guitar business, man.
Mm-hmm. Do you still play? I mean, are you still out and about playing when you can?
Not as much as I wish I could be. I got a kid, and I play a lot because I'm around guitars a lot, but I'm not playing.
Mm-hmm.
No, not right. Not
what did you use on stage? Vintage gear or just
always vintage gear? When I got signed to RCA, I bought the first guitar I bought for myself was with my bar mitzvah money. The first good guitar, which was a '93 Gibson Les Paul Premium Plus, which I still have, and I love that guitar. But then after that, I got into when we got signed to RCA, I bought a '65 SG Junior. I still have that guitar, although I broke the neck and had it repaired. It's still great.
It's probably the best sounding sounding guitar you have.
I got some good sounding guitars.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a big John Lennon guy, so you probably have casinos and stuff like that.
I love casinos. I have a really nice 330, which gives me that sound. Mm-hmm. I have a 65 330, which I like.
Well, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, that's a good segue into talking, because this show is about famous players and the effect they have on guitar values.
Yeah.
And there is no doubt that the number one influence when it comes to guitar values or guitar, people sought for guitars, it was the Beatles. So, when we talk about the price of a guitar, we know there's three things that really factor into it: historical significance, the rarity, and the wow factor. But the historical significance is really driven by the players that were known to play that guitar. To me, I don't think anybody would have cared about the Epiphone Casino. Well,
I do.
It's a good guitar. Yeah, I know. But I mean, it's almost as expensive to buy the Epiphone Casino as it is to buy the 330 from that same year. And that's just because it's all John Lennon. So there's without a doubt, like when you think of the Beatles, you think of John Lennon. And as far as the guitars that he used, the Casino is probably something that huge fans will always come looking for, right?
Sure. Well, and of course, if you talk about John Lennon, you talk about the Rickenbacker 325.
But it's impossible to find the solid body, from that era. So most people, what they have to do is they have to settle for the one that they make as a reissue, that has the solid body without the F and all that. But that itself, it was such a rare guitar, and it was an unpopular guitar.
Yeah, hard to play.
Hard to play. And I see people all the time with them. They love them. They don't care that they're hard to play. They just want that sound.
Absolutely. And it is a sound.
And then also, when you think of John Lennon, we also think of the J160E. I think he made that guitar more famous than anybody else who played it, without a doubt.
And it's got that P90 in it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if everybody knows that that's a P90 that's in that guitar. It doesn't really look like one.
Right. They don't have the screen on top or the shield on top.
Yeah, and the first ones, I think he had an early one that was a solid top. Like the first year was the nice solid top. And he certainly made that a valuable guitar. It certainly enhances the value of a guitar.
Right. And I think today people that are playing J160Es, they're really into British invasion era music, because that thing was used by everyone.
Yeah, I think they sound great.
I've never played one, to be honest.
Oh, no?
So somebody out there, if you got one, call me up. I'll come over.
Okay, a lot of acoustic guitar players will say they don't sound good because they have that pickup in there. A lot of acoustic guitar players is like that, or the 0018E, or the D18E, the Martin D18E, D28E. They'll say they're not good because they have the pickup in there. They'll say, guitars are like vacuum cleaners. They suck when they're plugged in.
Yeah. Now, of course, the George Harrison when we talk about George Harrison, the whole reason our Stratocasters are worth so much today is because George Harrison did not buy the Stratocaster when it was available. He got there 1 hour late, and he bought the 57 Duojet.
Yeah.
Now, that is a guitar, I was always confused, like, why it had to have the tombstone inlays? And that's because that was the one George Harrison had,
There you go.
It's a premium. Like, you're going to pay a little more. Nobody cares about the thumbprints. They don't care about the blocks. They want those tombstones on that Duojet.
Yeah, and those had great pickups.
Yep, and those are great guitars. And that's a great rock and roll guitar. You think of all the people that use that Duojet, that guitar will always be associated with George Harrison, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And then, of course, when you think of the 1964 360-12, that people will pay a premium for a 1965 that's got the old style horns on it, just because there's only one or two 64s out there.
Right.
Harrison has one, and then a lady has the other one, and then every once in a while you'll see a 65 show up that's got the old style horns, and they go for big bucks. They're going for, I think the last one sold for well over $30K for sure. And that's when you think of George Harrison, there are a lot of people also associated with that 12-string Rickenbacker, the Birds.
The Birds, yeah.
But it's always going to be a George Harrison. You play that, you immediately will think of George Harrison.
Yeah, got that sound.
And then, of course, the other one that we always think of George Harrison is the Country Gentleman, the 62 Country Gentleman. That's, out of all the Country Gentlemen, that year happens to be the one that people will go for just because of the George Harrison connection.
Yeah, they're great guitars. The earlier ones, they're great guitars. Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, Paul McCartney. Anybody out there playing a 61 Hofner 501, they're not playing it because it sounds good.
I would beg to differ.
Okay.
I think they sound great. I mean, you listen to a Beatles album, you don't think it sounds good?
Well, no,
it sounds great.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's got that thud. And it's funny.
I know what you mean.
And the thing is, like, McCartney was the first guy that they actually, the bass actually got pushed up into the mix, and you can hear the bass.
Right.
In the old days, the bass is always just buried. But
that's
McCartney,
a good point.
And McCartney was the guy that basically said, I want my bass up in the mix, right? So and he had it. Like, nobody else could write their own music and whatnot. When it came to engineering, they got to tell the engineer what they wanted, and McCartney wanted that bass up. And that's a great, but people pay a lot of money for the 62 61 Hofners. Now, how often do you see that one of those, like a left-handed one?
The one like the 61 has specific features, and I don't see that often at all. I see later versions more often, like from 65 on.
I think his second one was a 64, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, and those are more valuable. The ones that Paul McCartney played, perfect example of what a celebrity played model guitar, which makes it more value, is that guitar. Because the years that he played had specific features which make it more valuable because they're like the ones that Paul McCartney played. If you get the later versions, they don't have those same features. They're like different pickups.
And it had a lot more mid-range in the pickup there, so that there's a very different sound, very different sound. And of course, they always say that Paul McCartney is responsible for the fact that the Rickenbacker 4001 is a very popular bass. It's like one of the big three, and it's because he played that Rickenbacker 4001, although I think he played the export version, the S version, but I mean, that's a guy that basically, when you think of the 4001, you think of 70s rock and roll, but it was really McCartney who put that up in front.
And you think of all the magical mystery tour, he's playing that guitar all through those were, a lot of shots, a lot of videos of him playing, and also a little help from my friends, all that stuff.
And of course, I think, when we think about the Epiphone Texan, when you hear Yesterday, when somebody says, well, that's a Epiphone Texan, and that's just a very unique sounding guitar.
Yeah. People also think he played Blackbird on that guitar, but he played a D28 on Blackbird.
When you think of like the acoustic sound of Paul McCartney, you think of Yesterday, and it's that Epiphone Texan that has such a distinct mid and low,
and high.
So the Beatles, they definitely were the ones that really got, when we think about vintage guitars, when you think of people that buy guitars to be like their heroes, there you go. People are buying, 1968, 69, people are buying Gretsch's, they're buying Rickenbackers just because of the Beatles. That all kind of changes in the 1969-ish era when Eric Clapton comes along. And so, although he is credited with popularizing the Les Paul, but it was actually Mike Bloomfield, I think, that came first, right?
I don't know exactly. I wasn't around.
According to George Gruen, like when people say, oh, it's Telecasters and Les Pauls were the first vintage guitars, and people say, oh, it's because of Eric Clapton.
I think that's, but Bloomfield was. Yep,
and George Gruen said that it was really what Bloomfield was playing, which influenced who came into his store. And he said when Bloomfield was playing that Gold Top 55 Les Paul, everybody was coming in looking for those Gold Top 55 Les Pauls. And then when he switched to the Telecaster, everybody was in looking for Telecasters. Clapton certainly had that kind of effect later on, but it was really Bloomfield, according to the historian.
I think guys who are maybe a little older than myself, honestly, with all due respect. But I do think that, like, if you talk to somebody my age, like Clapton, I was watching Clapton and watching what he was playing, and that's what I wanted.
And it's, you think about 1966, and you think about what was coming out in 66. You got Revolver, all these, like, vocal bands, the British Invasion, and then there's Clapton Blues Breakers. And what a gut punch. Here's somebody talked the engineer into letting him crank an amp and recording it from across the room. There was no more you're flatlining or you're distorting, whatever. It was somehow Clapton was able to convince whoever was, I think it was like on a weekend or something, right? So the engineering crew was like, okay, whatever. And that changes everything now. All of a sudden, it's not the vocal. It's like, holy crap. Here's a Les Paul, 1960 Les Paul. And, Clapton picked that 60 Les Paul because he wanted to sound like Freddie King, because he saw Freddie King playing that gold top on the cover of Hideaway album. And somebody told me that Freddie King did not use that guitar on the recordings. He just was photographed with it. But I'll find out more about that later. But yeah, so to me, I think that Clapton Blues Breakers is kind of where the door gets kicked in. And all of a sudden...
Or the Beatles or the Kinks.
Yep, Kinks, with the just the power, that the bar chord all of a sudden, and you're actually amplified and you're pushing that distortion. You got the little overdrive now. Before the engineer would say none of that. You're distorting, but now it was like turn it up. Yep. Of course, Keith Richards probably was another guy out of that generation who had the most influence on, like, especially today. When you think of what Keith Richards was playing and how he was playing it, and today Telecasters, Les Paul Juniors, Les Paul Specials, Newmans, 5-string Newmans, all these things are all Keith Richards. And you think of how many people are out there trying to emulate that sound and that tweed amp sound that comes with it. You have to pair it together.
And Pete Townsend got his windmill from Keith Richards as well.
Yep. And Pete Townsend, when you think of Pete Townsend, he used a lot of things. I think there is nobody in the world, like when I'm gonna probably upset somebody, but there's a big difference between an SG SG Special and an SG Stand, right? Would you agree to that?
Huge
And
difference.
If you care about your tone, you're going to be using that SG Special. I mean, that's the live at Leeds sound.
Oh, exactly.
And Townsend wasn't using, he was using a Batwing, it was like a late 60s SG Special.
Yeah.
But man, plugging that into a high watt DR 103, but I guess by then it was modified to a CB 103. Just that the tone, I mean, you can't, that's one of the greatest tone albums of all time is that Live at Leeds.
Oh, yeah. Plus, he was using a Univox Super Fuzz.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that I have one of those. It just, oh my God, it sounds amazing.
When I think of that SG Special, it's Townsend for sure, but it's also early Santana. When you think of the early Santana, that's a S3 Special. That's a 63 SG Special. That was the Woodstock guitar.
That's a lot of sustain out of a Special.
Yep.
Man.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. And in the 80s, he switched to that Paul Reed Smith signature model, but all his early stuff was that SG Special.
Yeah.
And he actually had that awful comb on the bottom. You know how you got an SG Special, the first thing you do is you take that comb off and but
he put a badass bridge on there and make sure it stays in tune. Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, you think about as far as influence, what guitar people play. Well, let's go to Van Halen. Yeah. So I got this kind of in order. So I got the Beatles, Bloomfield. Now Van Halen comes next as far as influencing guitar. How many people picked up a guitar because of Van Halen?
So many people. My generation.
Right.
So many people. Yeah.
And you think about what was he trying to get? Well, he starts off, he wants it to sound like a Les Paul, but he wants it to play like a Stratocaster. So he builds his own Frankenstrat.
Right.
That thing had everything on it. Like, it was just pieced together, but everything, what he used, that was everybody was emulating. A lot of people don't realize that he used the Ibanez Destroyer on that first album too. I think a lot of the songs he played that Ibanez Destroyer, that knock.
Oh, wow.
That lawsuit era Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why today people pay a lot of money for Ibanez Destroyers just because of that Van Halen connection.
Right.
A lot of people. Yeah. And then of course the Kramer guitars, the 5150 models. And that's kind of like, everybody wants to play like Van Halen. They're going to play a Kramer somewhere along the lines.
I remember those times when everybody was buying Kramers and everything was locking tremolos.
Yep.
And I couldn't keep myself in tune.
Yep. You couldn't dive. That was the thing is that, you think about how guitar playing changed in 1979, 77, and it was really because you couldn't dive bomb on a Strat. Well, I guess you could come closest.
Hendrix.
Yeah, Hendrix
does.
Yeah. But as far as, the getting back into tune and going back and forth and that kind of thing, and that kind of like, that was really, the hardware's changed in 1980.
Yeah.
And that really made a big difference in what we're doing.
Well, and then when he went to the Steinberger and he could stay in tune when he was doing that, that was a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That the most valuable Eddie Van Halen guitars right now are the ones that he made for Music Man in the 90s.
Interesting.
And that's because that was the one that he directly had the most involvement in as far as design. And there are a lot of collectors out there because they came in a variety of colors. And there's two colors that now are currently you have to pay quite a bit, well over $10,000 for some. The black one and the purple one. And you can't fake them. You know how some people, you buy a natural and then because Music Man was very diligent with their serial numbers. And you can't, so nowadays everyone is accounted for. Everybody knows what came from the factory, what it came as. So the ones that were really purple and black do get a premium now. And those are like, I think the Van Halen aficionados really love those, his Music Man EVH models.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
For sure. Now, here's another band that sold more guitars almost as much as the Beatles. And that was Kiss.
Oh, yeah.
How many guys, well, are you old enough? Are you too, is that old? Is that beyond?
No, I remember the Kiss. I remember, but I was a little kid. But I remember, they appeal to little kids, man.
Yeah. I remember that there was a time in school when it was cool to like Kiss. And then there was a time in school when it was cool not to like Kiss,
Right.
And I remember in 8th grade, I guess, 7th grade, everybody was writing Kiss on their peachy. And I'm like, I was a nerd. I had no idea so I was doing the same thing. I just copied what they're doing. And people come up, hey, man, what's your favorite Kiss album? And I'm like, And I remember, how many people started playing guitar because of Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley. Everybody loved Ace Frehley. I think Ace Frehley wasn't he the guy everybody liked?
Yeah, I liked Ace. Yeah.
Yeah. And today, there are a lot of, nobody's going to buy an Iceman or play an Ibanez Iceman, unless they really have that Paul Stanley connection. They really want to play that Iceman.
I think that's true.
And they're big bucks now. Some of the early ones are pretty big bucks.
Yeah. When I hear Iceman, I think of Kiss.
Yep. And then, of course, Ace Frehley and that 73 Clownburst.
What?
Custom that he played.
Right. Yeah.
That thing was
3 pickup, right?
Yeah.
3 pickup custom.
With the white bobbins on it. It was just.
Yeah.
I think everybody wants to look like that. Everybody wanted to have.
Yeah.
And then, if you could get the light on fire like that, holy cow,
Now you're talking.
now you're talking, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And then we were talking when we were talking a couple days ago.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jack White. And
yeah.
I don't think, as far as the Beatles, as far as, doubling the value of a guitar just because of the association with this artist, believe it or not, Jack White did something to the airline Rezo glass guitar. That was a guitar that sold for normally a couple $100, and then he started playing it, the '64 airline JB Hudo Montgomery.
Yeah,
and that thing, that thing tripled in price.
Absolutely.
And today, I guess I don't know if are they still are people still coming in and saying I want one of those JB Hudo.
They definitely peaked. Peaked a while ago. I mean, because when Jack was playing them with the white stripes, that's probably the peak of their value. So I think they've probably leveled off since then. I had
them come down last year, and I had them go up a little bit this year.
Okay,
but they're 2 to 2.5 still, which is way above any other airline guitar.
Yeah, right.
It has to be that red. It has to be the JB Hudo or the.
Right.
There was another model that people. Sometimes there's like 2 model body styles that people go after.
Also, you played that silver tone. That silver tone that has the 8-10-inch speakers.
Yes.
And a head on the top. That's a wicked sounding amp. He definitely, and those are valuable, because of him.
Right. Definitely. Wow. We didn't say Jimi Hendrix yet.
How can you not say Jimi Hendrix yet? Jimi Hendrix.
And what guitar, when you think of Hendrix, what do you say? What jumps out at you?
White Strat. White 69 Strat.
Yep. And maple cap, neck. Holy cow. And you think of, when we were talking about how the Stratocaster was pretty unpopular coming into the 60s. Everybody was buying Gretches. Everybody was buying, and the neck code from the Stratocaster goes to 2 to 13 because it's obviously somebody in the bean counters are starting to talk about maybe we should phase this out. We're not 1967. What did they sell? Only a handful. Like it was like the lowest production year ever. Stratocasters.
Correct.
And that's why today, if you're a birth year collector and you're 1967, good luck finding a 67 Strat.
Right.
or finding one and not paying as much as you would for a 62 or something like that. But so Hendrix shows up.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, boom. Do you think the effect was right away, or did it it didn't really catch on until Clapton started using Blackie?
I don't know. I think if you went and saw Jimi Hendrix, you wanted to get a Stratocaster, man.
Yep.
If you saw him play, you were probably had your mind blown and you just wanted to get a Stratocaster, I would think.
I would think so too, but when I look around, then a lot of the fellow artists weren't switching to Stratocaster, which is weird.
Huh.
But I could be totally wrong.
They were playing Les Pauls.
Yeah. But also, you think of Hendrix, you think of the Marshall, the 100-watt Marshall.
Oh, yeah.
Amplification now is advanced such that you can play, because you got to remember back then there wasn't PA systems. Your house volume was your stack volume.
Right.
And you think about all those
crazy to think
100-watt
crazy to think
amps. Yeah. Now everybody knows, Hendrix played those 100-watt Marshalls on stage, but he certainly didn't. You can't record like that. So I believe he was just using the small blackface amp to record, the Fender reverbs or the deluxe reverbs, or those kind of things.
Is that right? He didn't record with the Marshalls?
Oh, I don't think you could.
Oh.
I don't think anybody could. Well, maybe I could be completely corrected on this. But then also you think of all the pedals pedal use that came into use after Hendrix.
Oh yeah.
Fuzz. Although people were using fuzz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got Keith Richards. The Maestro.
The Maestro
fuzz tone. The original Maestro fuzz. That's like 66.
Yeah, Jumpin' Jack Flash. And I think he put that there as a horn line because they were just going to put a horn line in there, but they left it in there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's the one, man. That's the beginning of that.
And then you think of like a lot of the Hendrix pedals. I think they were made more popular. They were more popularized by Robin Trower a few years later, like the Univibes and the and the all that that kind of stuff. But
man, that Univibe, what a sound!
Yep, that was something. And then the Octavia, he used that Octavia. When you think of that first Hendrix album, just the just the amount of the fuzz in that Octavia.
Absolutely.
Crazy. So do you remember seeing Hendrix for the first time? How old were you?
Well, so I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and my guitar teacher, I'm from Chicago, and my guitar teacher, I learned guitar at a place called Gand Music and Sound in Chicago, and my guitar teacher was like, you gotta check this guy out, because I was into Pete Townsend. Pete Townsend made me want to play guitar, but then he was like, you gotta check this guy out, and he gave me "Are You Experienced?" That was incredible.
Yeah, you were experienced after that, man.
Yeah, I was, man. He turned me on, and that's and then all his albums. I love Axis Bold as Love.
It's weird is when you think of Hendrix, and you think of the searing lead guitar, but like on Axis Bold as Love, the rhythm guitar is better than almost any rhythm guitar album ever made.
It's next level. It's another planet. He was from another planet.
Yeah, I mean, when people always say, "Oh yeah, Foxy Lady," Purple Haze, and you're like, no, listen to the rhythm on all that stuff. Axis Bold to Love. You just listen to the rhythm on all those songs, the rhythm track.
That's a very good point. And he always said his favorite guitar player was the guy from Chicago.
Yeah, no, he was good. Like you think of that first Chicago album,
Terry Kath.
That's it. And you think about the Searing Telecaster.
Yeah.
And that's like that's a guitar dominated album. And of course, it all changes a couple of albums later, where it's all
very much so.
It becomes what they call chick music,
Yeah.
But man, I tell you, people, if you're a big guitar guy, you listen to that very first Chicago album. It's like one of the very first double albums ever made. Wasn't it like one of the first rock and roll double albums?
Is that right?
It's one of them. I think it came out about the same time as Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. It was like a very
Tommy was 69.
Yeah. I think the first double was Blonde on Blonde, and then Freak Out was another one. The Frank Zappa.
Oh yeah,
and then I believe that this one was like right up there too. That was the first double.
Cool.
As a beginning, like a first introductory album, as far as somebody coming out with an their first album is a double album.
Wow.
So that's Hendrix, man. You think of Hendrix, you think of the Stratocaster. You always think of Hendrix. It's funny that you think about when people first saw that Stratocaster. It was Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
And Buddy Holly, if you think about it, in those days, only country guys were playing Stratocasters and Telecasters. And here is Buddy Holly. Boom.
Yeah.
And it was such an effect. It was such a, especially when the day the music died, when he was killed in the airplane crash.
Yeah.
There was like such a, that changes music forever. But also, it was really because of that Buddy Holly and that Stratocaster that Gretsch and Gibson go to double cut. Because there was like this big double cut. Everybody's going for that double cut now.
Right.
And that's why in 1960, you see both Gibson and Gretsch go to a double cut. And it was really because they call it the Buddy Holly effect. There was such a, because I was like, somebody was one of the first artists that were focused on guitar playing, not so much singing, because in those days, everybody was a vocal band.
Right.
So crazy. But
but
we like it. We're happy.
Absolutely.
We'll take our Stratocaster no matter what caused you to buy it.
Oh yes.
Now Jimmy Page. When I say Jimmy Page, what do you say? What do you think?
I think of The Song Remains the Same when he's playing his 1959 Les Paul. But there's other guitars. But that's what I think of. I think of that Les Paul and the way he played it, and the way he used his volumes and the volumes and tones to finesse tones.
Yeah, I think out of all the Les Paul giants, Jimmy Page probably sold more. There's a joke that Jimmy Page's Telecaster sold more Les Pauls than, because people don't realize that he played a Telecaster on Led Zeppelin 1.
Exactly.
And the same thing with like Billy Gibbons too. He played a lot of that first ZZ Top album was a Telecaster as well. The tone, the searing tone.
Right.
But you think of Jimmy Page and you think of that Les Paul, that 59 Les Paul, and then of course you also think of that double neck.
ES 1275. Right?
When you watch Song Remains, when you're watching Song Remains the Same, who didn't dream about walking around with dragon pants and a slung double neck Gibson EDS 1275.
Oh, totally.
Hanging down by your knees.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
You wouldn't go home alone, that's for sure.
That's rock godness right
there. That's it, man. Yeah. Wow.
But also, the Les Paul, him, and believe it or not, also in the 80s, Slash, when he was playing a Les Paul.
Yeah. Yep.
I always think when I got my Les Paul, I wanted to be Jimmy Page. I just wanted to be Jimmy Page. I worshiped that way he played that guitar. But then Slash also held it so nicely and played it so nicely. I wanted to be like that.
But I mean, because in the 1980s, you think about how everything was changing and everybody was going into the pointy guitars.
Right.
How nice was it to have Guns N' Roses with a Telecaster Les Paul Attack?
Yeah.
It was old school. It was like, that's why I love that album.
Me too.
And it was weird. I didn't realize, I think the very first Les Paul book I got, how there's probably been more books written about the Les Paul Sunburst than Abraham Lincoln by this point.
Right.
But you know how everybody, and if you get a Les Paul book, it's going to be pictures of Les Pauls. Nobody cares about the features and this and that. It's really like, here's this number, and this is the picture of it up close.
Yeah.
And I remember the first, I can't think of the book. It wasn't the Burst Busters. It was like that one that was from Japan. I remember just looking through it and going, Les Paul 9 dash whatever, owned by Slash. And then you turn the page. Les Paul number whatever, owned by Slash. I was like, holy cow! Does this guy own every 59 Les?
Yeah, and to think the guitar he was playing on Appetite for Destruction was not even a real Les Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think he's probably got. I think between him and Joe Bonamassa, they probably had the largest burst. Well, somebody will correct me and email me, but he certainly had. I remember just looking at that very first book when I first started buying books about Les Pauls, because I just love looking at the pictures.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, every third page was the one that was owned by him.
Yeah. I had a book called Gibson Electrics. You have that book?
Yes.
I love that book.
Yep.
Yeah. I used to just look at in the center, there's color pictures. There's like one guy holding two ES 295s gold. Mm-hmm. I would just stare at that.
Yeah. And the ES 295, I mean, if you're a big Scotty Moore guy, that's the guitar you have.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That was always my dream guitar. I never bought one. That's weird. All these years, I've never bought one. That was always one of my dream guitars.
You need one.
Yeah, I know. I'll put it on my list. Yeah. My wife will approve it, and who knows.
Cool.
And now, because I really got into Stratocasters in the mid-'80s. And people always say, oh, that's because of Stevie Ray Vaughan. Oh. And I start thinking, I'm like, well, maybe. But I think I was into Strats before Texas Flood came out. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, I remember listening to Texas Flood when I was in the Navy. So that'd be like maybe a couple of years later. Like when you think of that resurgence in 1985, where people start going back to slab necks and maple neck Stratocasters, it was really, they say it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. People going for that old school tone back to the basic.
Yeah. For me, and this, I don't know, Stevie Ray Vaughan, incredible. I mean, I blew me away. I saw him play with Jeff Beck, one of the best guitar concerts I've ever seen, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jeff Beck. But when I bought my first Strat, I was into Rush, and I liked Alex Lifeson's black Strat, so I got a black Strat like Alex Lifeson.
Yeah, and you don't even think of Alex Lifeson in Strats. You always think of him as the custom
335.
Yeah, 335 and the white. Yeah.
It was Big Money era.
Yeah,
it was like the Power Windows album era. Yeah, and I was in high school.
Yeah. The one thing that I was influenced by Stevie Ray Vaughan was that. I think that's why I bought my Super Reverb. Just the thought that, to me, it was just like that sound came from,
right.
I didn't realize it was heavily modded. Well, maybe his Super Reverb wasn't heavily modded, but his Viververb certainly was.
Yeah.
And when you think of Stevie Ray Vaughan, you think of the Ibanez Tube Screamer.
Oh, yeah.
And people,
that's a class. Yeah.
You can be honest with me.
Yeah.
How many Tube Screamers do you have to go through before you find a good one?
Are you talking about vintage ones?
Yeah, TS-808.
Honestly, not many.
They all sound good to you?
I mean, to my ear, I've find that they sound good.
Yeah. I just, when I started looking
something different.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you something different.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. What are you going to say?
No, just that, when everybody wants that TS-808 because that was pictured with Stevie Ray Vaughan. Like there's a picture of him and it's there. But I don't think they realized that he didn't use that on his albums. He used a TS-9 on the record.
So yeah. So I used, the TS-808, it was always above my price grade, the original one. So I always had TS-9s and I always thought that he used a TS-9. But yeah.
On the records, from what I was told, that he actually just used the TS9, but everybody wants the TS808. But I heard people that you can't really use them because the button is a sticky thing, that flat square button. You can only has so many stomps in it before it's no longer usable. But I don't have it. It's weird because I have a big collection of overdrives and I don't have a tube screamer in there because I haven't found the TS808 that sounds right yet. You know what I mean? I have my scouts out there looking for them.
Do you have a TS9?
No, I don't.
Oh, and you must get one of those.
Yeah, I probably. When it comes to overdrives, I'm pretty strict about not changing away from my OCD because I have OCD.
Okay. I'm a TS9 guy. I'm like a
I'll look for a TS9. That'll be. In fact, I'll do.
I love a TS9.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I'll buy them whenever I see it.
Good.
Yes. Yeah. And he also used the TS10.
TS10, right.
Yeah.
They all sound great. I was just told that the TS808s can be kind of finicky because they switch transistors.
Yeah, that may be true.
And you got to be very picky because some are worth money and some weren't worth as much.
That may be true.
And it really has to do with the transistor number.
Okay.
But there's people that know that information, and I don't.
I
would call somebody and say, "Hey, is this the right transistor?"
I have not played one that didn't sound good.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, when I take David Gilmour, what do you think of?
Well, I think of amazing tone and beautiful melodies, but I also think of his Ross compressor. Yes. And I mean, when you get an original one of those, man, they sound so good.
Yep.
That really is his sound. Also, he used a TubeWorks tube overdrive.
Yep.
You know about that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think of his black Strat. Of course, excuse me. Of course, the black Strat.
Yeah, I remember watching that live in Pompeii when he's sitting on the ground like detuning and tuning up that maple cap black Strat. And maple cap, to me, the maple cap black Strat is the coolest Strat. Yes, I love all my other Strats. My '69 black maple cap, and it's because of live at Pompeii. And it's because of Hendrix, of course. Hendrix's last Strat. The band Gypsies album was recorded with that black maple cap Strat. I don't know. I mean, when you look for Strats, how often do you find maple cap Strats?
I mean, not that often. I mean, that's right. Not that often, but I look for them. Yeah,
and that's why Hendrix used maple cap Telecaster necks on his Strats because you can find maple cap Telecasters. They're not plentiful, but they're certainly not as rare as Stratocaster. But that's the thing too. You're going to pay a lot of money for a maple cap Stratocaster, but it's worth it, right?
Absolutely.
People always, it's a big neck, it's big headstock, got the poly on the back. No way, man. That thing is a rock and roll machine. You plug that into any pedal, it's not going to sound good plugged directly into a deluxe reverb or into a tweed, but it's the perfect rock and roll Stratocaster.
Yeah. If you're a good musician, you can make it sound good. It's a good guitar.
Now, when I say Mark Knopfler, when I say Mark Knopfler, what do you think?
I think of his red Strat. Yeah. Man, what a player.
Yeah. If anybody defined a Stratocaster sound, it was Salt and the Swing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking 80s. You're talking 80s. Like, because you say Steve Ray Vaughan, but there was also Mark Knopfler.
Yep. Well, you think of all the great Stratocaster guys that came back in the 80s, and we talk about how transparent the Strat was in that time. It was really the player. Of course, that Salt and the Swing sound, there's a big component added to that Stratocaster, and that's that brown Vibrolux. But it's not just a brown Vibrolux. It has a Celestian greenback in it. So I know people that try to, I have a brown Vibrolux, and I try to get that Mark Knopfler sound. It's just not right there because I don't have and I'm not going to put a Celestian greenback in my original, but maybe be nice. I can get close. Yeah. That Vibrolux though is a 12-inch, a 6L6 brown amp with a 12-inch speaker is a great amp.
Oh my gosh, with an old Strat, forget about it.
But what's really weird? Here's another thing too about Mark Knopfler. How many late 1930s style O's were sold after the Brother in Arms album came out?
Many.
Yep. Yeah. And I listened to that album. Do you hear him playing a national style O on that album anywhere? I don't think he does.
Maybe the last song.
Oh, maybe the last song. I know that he played it on earlier.
It's like a mellow song.
Remember how?
I think the last song. Mellow song.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But gosh, you think about you talk about a guitar that doubles and triples in price within one cycle of the vintage guide. Was that one? Because anytime a guitar shows up on the album of an album cover, that guitar becomes iconic, and everybody.
Oh yeah, that was a huge.
Everybody had to have that
huge album.
That really highly detailed late 30s national style O.
Yeah,
that was something. And I don't have one yet, and I don't know why. I guess because they're just too expensive. They're not expensive at all.
They're not cheap.
Yeah. The one that has that kind of detail is expensive. One that's very plain is going to be very.
They're beautiful sounding guitars for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. So you think of I'm trying to think of album cover guitars that are iconic, and that definitely probably the most iconic is that Brother in Arms album with that guitar.
It may be.
Yep. Now,
yeah.
Let's talk about Billy Gibbons. When you think about Billy Gibbons, what guitars do you think of?
I think of the Billy Bow.
Yeah.
The Gretsch Billy Bow.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I think of. But he's played so many guitars. I mean, he's got a...
I think, people always think of that furry Dean that spins around. You can buy him,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with it. You'd have to be in a... I think, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this. When it comes to tone, I'm a tone purist. And I believe there are two guys that had perfect tone to begin with. Clapton and Billy Gibbons. And then... After they achieved immaculate tone, they changed their tone. I know that Billy Gibbons found fame and fortune by changing his tone. Man, that iconic Les Paul or Telecaster, or broadcaster actually, on the first album, second album, Trace Hombres. That was an iconic sound, through that.
So what was Clapton's best tone?
Beano, no doubt about it. Like the first Cream, it's that 1960. Like that's
the brown sound. Yeah.
Yep. And then he changes to that woman tone. And I know that people love that, but I never did. I mean, did you?
I mean, I like it all.
Yeah. To me, it's like when I put on the Fresh Cream album, and I listened to that 1960 Les Paul cranked through that Marshall, through that Blues Breaker 2x12. Like I said, the Blues Breaker album, he may not have used that same amp. I think he did, but I could be wrong. But to me, that was perfect tone. Like you can't touch that. And then all of a sudden it shifts and it switches again. And then he goes to, I love his Brownie tone on his first album, or the Derek and the Dominoes tone. I think that had more to do with me looking for a maple neck Strat than anything. Remember they put that maple neck Strat on the back cover of Derek and the Dominoes? And I remember that's why I wanted one.
Yeah.
So I think I did that before SRV came around.
Yeah.
Talk about tone. That tone was good. But then, today, I don't know. Gosh, I'd love for him to pick up a 60 Les Paul and plug into a Blues Breaker again. And who knows?
Right.
And the same thing with Billy Gibbons, of course, he can point to me and say, you got to evolve. I'm like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
But man, I love that Trace Ombre. I love that tone.
Oh.
I just love that tone.
Undeniable.
Now, here's some people from your generations. Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. They really caused a lot of people to pick up guitars and play. What do you think of Steve Vai? What do you think of?
I think of Ibanez. I think of his album Flexibles. I think of David Lee Roth, Eat 'em and Smile. So he basically the gems. You think of all those great multicolor gems and stuff. But that's all big. There's now a whole market for that. Collectors are. A whole market. Yeah, absolutely. What a guitar! Yep.
But you know what I think is his most iconic tone ever is in the movie Crossroads when he plays that red Charvel. And I think he used his green meanie. That's what he called it. It was like a Charvel. It was another Charvel. You just think of how he played that thing. That might have been the first time we really were exposed to that sort of abuse, guitar abuse.
I love the guitar playing in that scene, man. At the end of Crossroads, man.
Don't you think that he beat Ralph Macchio? Don't you think that he kicked that poor Willie Brown should have been hauled off the hill because Joe Satriani or Steve I really did kick his ass, man.
yeah. Man, it was wicked tones, wicked playing in that.
And then of course Joe Satriani, which he was actually Steve Vai's guitar teacher.
Surfing with the Elves.
And so he's associated with a lot of things, but I always think of him as the JS1 Chrome Boy. And that's a hard guitar to find because the chrome didn't stay on the Chrome Boy. The chrome and the boy separated. But that's another one. Those are actually very collectible now.
I haven't had.
Yeah, you can't find the JS1, JS2, JS3. There's like a whole early JS stuff. You get the 1000s. You get those a lot, but
I don't even remember when they came out. Even seeing them in the store.
Yeah, they're hard to find. That's for sure. I know people that collect them. They all want them all.
Yeah, like I remember when the Brian May guitar came out, like the first version of it. I remember seeing it in the store, wanting it. I just wish I bought it.
Now, Brian May, you always think of the red special. In fact, talk about tone, that Vox, the magic of that Vox with that red special. People, I remember trying to figure out, what is that? And, he built that thing himself. I think he even carved old furniture. I don't know. But I know that Burns makes one now, but Guild made the BHM you could buy in the 80s. You could buy the Guild versions.
Right.
Those are still collectible.
Yeah.
People buy those because they want to sound like that. And, and hopefully they're playing through a Vox, a nice Vox amp.
Yeah. That's a great sound.
Yep. I love that. Talk about iconic guitar playing. That doesn't sound like anybody else.
Queen.
a guitar that does not sound like any other guitar.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I say Jeff Beck, what do you think of?
I want to say is the Les Paul that he played. Mm-hmm. For me, it's that. For me, it's that guitar. I know later he played the Strat, you know, the yellow Strat and everything, but for me, it's that Les Paul. It's on. Was it Wired?
Yeah,
it's on the cover.
No, that was Blow by Blow,
or Blow by Blow. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's
Wired is
the Jeff. Like I think of Jeff Beck. Like when I think of everything that was going on in 1966, 65, 66, you got all these harmony bands playing. You know, you basically got Everly Brothers singing for the Ventures. You know, like that's the Beatles, right? And you get all of a sudden, you get Jeff Beck kicking the door in with that 54 Esquire, saturated, a low power amp, dimed.
Oh yeah.
And you think of Train Kept Rolling. You just think of those first Yardbirds albums. God, you know, like whoa, Telecaster. You know, to me,
Telecaster.
You know, that was it. And then, and of course, Jeff Beck. I think of like out of all the Beck, Clapton, and Page. You know, we all kind of admit that Jeff Beck was probably the best talented, but he didn't really have the
style.
No, he didn't have the commercial success because he was very like he did an album like Wired. You know, it didn't really have commercial success. But when you when you listen to Wired, does anybody even come close to that kind of tone? You know, and that cover, you think of that white Stratocaster. Yeah. I think of two covers with white Stratocasters. One's Robin Trower Live and Jeff Beck Wired. You think of how many white Stratocasters were bought, and I know that was I wanted that white Stratocaster because of that. You know,
for sure, me too.
And, speaking of Trower and speaking of all these '70s guys, it's weird that we look down upon '70s Strats. You know how people look down, 3-bolt neck, but man, our favorite music was recorded with them. You know, you think of Bridge of Sighs with Robin Trower. You think of Blackmore. This was all done before 1974, of course. You know, because in '74 they changed that bridge, and I think that's where the Stratocaster changes when they go back to flat poles and they change that pressed bridge into that Mastak. Horrible. Well, I'm sorry, people. I didn't mean to say that.
It's all right.
But yeah, you think about
what are you referring to?
No, so I always, you know, I think of those Mastak bridge Stratocasters, and I'm glad that they went back to pressed steel. You know, in fact, you know, you think of Trower.
I'm sure there's people that agree with you out there. So. Okay.
Yeah, so you know, don't look down upon those 72 Stratocasters and 73. If it was recorded before 1974 with a Stratocaster, it was probably a store-bought Stratocaster that, you know, somebody ran to the store and bought it and brought it in, and they had 4 or 5 of them sitting there, you know.
Right.
So, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. When
you think of Rory Gallagher, what do you think of?
His iconic Strat.
You know that's coming up for sale right now?
Really?
Yep. I don't know the details.
What's that going to go for?
I don't know. I mean, I wish I could go there, but you know, my children want inheritance.
Right. I mean, the custom shop version is a great guitar.
Can you imagine the fun? Can you imagine the Relic guy, you know, having to Relic that thing? You know?
Great. He did a great job.
Perfect. They do such a good job with those Relic, you know, when they do those signature model Relics.
Yeah.
I mean, they do right down to the little nicks on the, where the clip,
Absolutely.
You know, where the case clip maybe went down and hit it on the side. You know, they're really good about that.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
So,
for sure.
You know, what about Zappa? Do you think he sold a lot of guitars? People wanted to.
Yes, I do. I think of him playing an SG.
Yep. A modified SG, but man, I think of like Apostrophe, maybe Hot Rats, where I think he's.
And he also played a Les Paul.
Yeah, he used for Hot Rats. He used a gold top, and I know that he used this SG modified, the Baby Snakes SG for Apostrophe, but I think a lot of that Apostrophe comes from the fact that he's plugged into a pig nose.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like that to me is like,
yeah,
wow, that's like crazy.
I like that Hot Rats. What's he playing on Hot Rats?
I think it's a gold top. I think it's just a gold top.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if it's a P90 or humbucker. I could look at pictures, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good album. Great album.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, you know, we could talk all day about this kind of stuff. I guess,
you
know, it comes down to it, though. We think of, here's one, Prince. Remember I was talking the other day about how I put the Hohner Mad Cat in the book this year. Because that's a $10,000 guitar now.
$10,000?
And it's because there just aren't, you know, because everybody wants to look like, I don't know.
I had one not long ago. I didn't get $10,000.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. You know, maybe it's not that anymore. I don't know. I know that.
I mean, this was a while.
I just know that there's people out there say, what is that thing that Prince is playing, that Telecaster with the tiger guard on it? And I'm like, no, it's a Hohner. Mad Cat.
Yeah.
Mad Cat. Pretty cheap, unplayable guitar, but if you're in a Prince, if you're a Prince guy, you're gonna get it.
I liked it. It was a good guitar. I actually thought it was a pretty good guitar when I had it.
Yeah, I got to play
years ago. Yeah.
Now here's as far as guitars. Bob Dylan. Do you think he sold a lot of guitars?
Oh yeah. Yes.
What guitar you think was his most emulated? People buy.
I mean, I think of that '65 Strat that he started playing. Yep. Believe it or not, an electric guitar. Believe it or not,
that changed music. Remember the people that booed him at the Newport Jazz Festival?
That might be one of the most significant guitars.
Yeah, it sold at auction a couple years ago for quite a bit. I don't. It certainly it's been eclipsed lately, but I think when that one sold, it was for the highest amount.
Oh yeah.
But you also think of Bob. You also think of that Nick Lucas special that he's playing, in his early days.
Oh yeah. That's a special. Those are special guitars.
And then you think of the Nashville days with his J200. You always think of that sound.
Yeah. He's also played a 0021, Martin 0021, and all different Martins, a lot of different. But I didn't the Strat didn't like some guy steal it and bring it on an airplane.
There's a story there.
It's a good story.
We should chase that down.
Yeah, it's good.
Do you think Bruce Springsteen sold a lot of guitars?
Yes. Of course. Yes.
And what guitars do you think people emulate? Telecasters.
I would think Telecasters. He also plays Takamines.
Mm-hmm. I think when I think of Bruce Springsteen, you just think of the album cover with him with that 50s Tele Esquire hybrid.
Oh,
that's iconic picture. Yeah. And you think of like there's nothing when you talk about. There's very few Telecaster pictures on a cover that probably sold more guitars than that album cover, Born to Run. But you don't think of like when you think of him playing, you don't really, he's not like a Roy Buchanan. Well, oh man, you got to listen to, but
he's a songwriter.
But the songwriting, and the guitar playing on the rhythm is just incredible. Yeah, and I think he's probably sold more Telecasters than
probably anybody. Yeah, and he's a great guitar player too. He was a guitar player before he was Bruce Springsteen in that other band. Yeah, just the guitar player. Yeah.
Do you think there are a lot of Jerry Garcia people out there that buy Alembics because they want to be just like Jerry Garcia?
Yes. Yes. Jerry Garcia, that's a whole thing, man. People love Jerry Garcia for good reason. Mm-hmm. What a fantastic guitar player. But I mean, there's a whole segment of guitars that are just not only Alembics that are similar to, the Travis Beans, different than Alembic, but people who want to sound like Jerry.
Yeah.
There's guitars that are made just to sound like Jerry.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So we touched on a lot of there's these. I guess we got all the big ones. One thing before I noticed that we're going a little long here, so I want to talk. Okay. I want to ask you a story about fakes.
Yeah.
I think you are the best. You are the best detector of fake guitars out there. You are known worldwide. Nobody's going to get anything by you. So,
thank you.
So what do you look for when you get a guitar and it's a fake? What do you look for?
It depends what kind of guitar it is. I look for features. I look for the quality of the finish. I look at the truss rod. I look at the serial number, of course. Mm-hmm. I look at the pot codes, the pot code dates. I look at the neck angle. I look at whether different parts of the guitar look like they're worn differently. Mm-hmm. If a part of the guitar looks newer than if the body's all worn out but the neck has no wear on it, that's a telltale sign. Mm-hmm. There's a truss rod, a serial. Like one time I had a guy sell me a Rickenbacker that had a real Rickenbacker serial number on it, but it was a strange model and it wasn't real. And, you got to look out. You got to be aware. I have some crazy stories of looking for stuff. There's got to be careful. It's good to buy from a dealer.
What's the biggest people that fake? What do they fake most?
Well, Strats are easy to fake. Strats and Tellies are easy to fake because they're such interchangeable parts. But I had a instance where I bought I went to buy a 60. The guy told me it was like a 62 ES335, and that would have like 5 serial numbers. It was this guitar had 5 serial numbers, and I ended up buying it, and I quickly realized I had made a mistake, and it was like a 67 35. I don't know. I was going very quickly at a guitar show, but I ended up going to the guy. I ended up calling the guy, explaining to him the difference. Somebody had erased a serial number on the guitar, and I ended up going to the guy's house with my assistant, and he lived in this crazy house, and he had all these guitars, and he made it right, and he sold me a bunch of other guitars, so it turned out all right. But you know, people change serial numbers. People a really good thing to do is to look at the truss rod. Make sure it's not like Chinese. Make sure it looks like a Gibson truss rod, and also the Fender truss rod looks like a Fender truss rod, and that's a good thing to do.
I'm always surprised
I hope that's helpful.
People are fooled. On Facebook, somebody always puts their Chibson up on the thing and says, "Can you tell me if this is real?" And everybody just they lambast the guy, and it's like the most obvious thing is always the bridge screws, the screws that they use to put it into. The Chinese knockoffs, they can't use the right size screw. And they always use that larger screw. Yeah. And everybody's like, hey,
Yeah. The screws will be metric and not American. Yeah. That's a
I see. I catch that. I look at that. Those two screws on the bridge or on the ABT. And you're like, the wrong size.
Yeah. But it's you gotta bring the guitar to a professional, especially if you're spending a lot of money, and be careful.
What do you estimate? People that don't buy from dealers. What do you guess that they got ripped off?
What's that?
Like question? What do you think is a percentage of people that buy online and they don't really know what they're getting, that they didn't get what they thought online. They bought?
You want me to guess the percentage? 10%?
10%? Okay.
Is that a good guess?
Well, Kibo tells me it's more like 40%.
Wow.
That they return because it was labeled, whatever. And it's not the person who's selling it's fault. They just flipping it, right? They just buy it from someone.
Right.
And that's why, we always say, the dealers, when you buy it, take it right to a dealer, somebody you trust. He'll look at it right away, and he'll point right to something and say, oh, you got a problem.
Yeah.
I know that I'd be fooled by a lot of the stuff that's coming out now. I was pretty good about refin stuff, but now the refins are done properly. People are faking it perfectly. Right. They're aging them perfectly. They're black lighting them perfectly with the, the right lacquers and stuff. So it's hard.
On the fender bodies, you want to look at the paint stick holes, all this.
You look at the paint in the jack hole too. A lot of times they forget to paint that jack hole properly. Repaint, I should say, repaint the jack hole properly. They tape over it. Right. That's a tell. Also the green guards, there are a lot of green guards out there that are fake.
Absolutely.
And serial numbers mean nothing because nobody ever wrote down serial numbers. There's no book that tells you this serial number went with this kind of thing. So
except for the Gibson Ledger.
Except for the Gibson Ledger, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Howie, I am so happy. This is good. Any other stories you want to throw at me?
I don't know. I just want to say, I really like podcasts. I think it's fantastic. When I started doing this, I just wanted to get to guitar shows to learn about the things that you're talking about, just to learn about it. And I love talking to people about all these things that you're talking about on these podcasts, and your interviews have been great. And the thing that people are talking about vintage guitars on your podcast, they're talking about magic. They're talking about the magic of a vintage guitar. And I love it. I just love it.
And I kind of have to, because I come at it with a metric looking, because I got to put a price on it. But I'd rather, in fact, I think, that it's better never to talk about the price.
Why do you say
Well, just
that?
because to me it's magical. If if that 63 Stratocaster has your name on it,
right,
it's destined to find you. But nowadays it's hard because it's going to cost you $30,000.
Right. But there's guitars out there that you can find that have that magic,
and that's what we try. That's what we try to do in this show too. Is they say, hey, you don't have to buy the pre-CBS thing. There's stuff out there that is magical.
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, I found little Goya acoustics that are $600 that have that magic.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah.
All righty.
So
I took up quite a bit of your time, and I can't thank you enough.
I'm so happy to do it.
We'll talk again. Maybe in the second season. We'll do an in-depth discussion on fakes in the second season.
Whatever you want to do.
Maybe we'll do like a roundtable in Dallas or something. Maybe we'll just sit around with you, me, Kibo, John Magellani. We'll just talk about fakes. We'll do like a roundtable.
Cool.
Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you guys again. This was show number 10 in season number 1. I love all your feedback. I'm getting tons of feedback. We're going to do a second season. But before we do the second season, we're going to do a special edition, which will come out right as the price guide comes out, the 2025 price guide. And we'll sit with the VG gang, Guitar Magazine gang. We'll talk, and we'll talk about what's going on in the vintage guitar market right now based on the guide. We'll drop that podcast right around the time that the new guide comes out. And then the second season will start probably in 6 months, January or December-ish. We'll know for sure. We'll let you know in the magazine when it's starting. But I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in to the first season of the podcast, Buy That Vintage Guitar. And I appreciate all your feedback. Remember, ram@vintageguitar.com. Any comments you have, if you want, maybe you have show ideas for next season. Maybe you know the perfect topic, because I can always use help when it comes to that kind of stuff. Thank you guys again. We'll talk to you again next season.